The rules of the NCAA have changed. Specifically speaking, we're talking about unofficial and official visits. This is what you guys have been waiting to eat up. I know it. I know it's still confusing to many of you. So let's clear up some of those confusions. All right. Biggest change right now that happened on April 25th. I will say this. The old rule allowed junior golfers, I'm going to refer to all junior golfers as prospective student athletes tonight. I'll go ahead and just make an acronym called PSAs, or I'll say junior golfers. But PSAs, let me make this point. PSAs in the past could make unofficial visits to college campuses and meet face-to-face with college coaches at any time. Now, there were certain exceptions to that. Don't hold me to those exceptions, like the dead periods during the national signing periods, things like that. But for the most part, in the past, PSAs and junior golfers were allowed to take visits and speak with college coaches on campus at any time. That has changed. Unofficial visits now begin September 1st of the junior golfer's junior year in high school, okay? So it's not so much that you can't take visits, whether it's with your coach, your mom, your dad, whoever else that's bringing you these visits, or on your own. It's not that you can't take these visits. It's that a college coach is in Division I. Let me make that clear. These are only rule changes for Division I tonight. I think that's a big misunderstanding. Division II, Division III are not affected. It's just Division I. That has changed for Division I. And what I'm going to say tonight and explain to you guys is that is going to change and shake up the recruiting atmosphere quite a bit. And we still don't know, and I'm going to be brutally honest with you guys. We still don't know. Many coaches don't know how this is going to affect the recruiting world, but we can get pretty close. I think we can create some hypotheses out there about what this might do. So let's get into that. All right, so the facts are unofficial visits are not allowed on campus with college coaches until September 1st of your junior golfer's junior year, okay? So if you're a sophomore, if you're a 2020 grad in high school right now, and you're like, I want to go on some visits this summer, you can take those visits, but don't expect to get in front of a college coach. That is super bad luck on your part. If you're a 2020 and you had visits lined up, I am so sorry. A lot of my clients were in the same boat. We had great relationships, and we still hope to have great relationships with those coaches, but we were, and they are unable to take those visits this summer, okay? All right, so what else has changed? Unofficial visits. For those of you that don't know the difference, let me explain. An unofficial visit is one that is funded primarily by you, the player, or your family to a school. They do not pay for travel. They do not pay for a meal while you're there. They don't even pay for parking, maybe a parking meter while you're there. They are not allowed, as far as NCAA rules go, to do any of that. So basketball tickets, football tickets, a lot of these big box bumper sticker, as I refer to them, universities, schools that you see on ESPN, schools that you see on bumper stickers, big time Power 5 conference, ACC, SEC, Pac-10, or Big 10, Pac-12 schools. You are not going to have contact with most of those coaches until September 1st of junior year. Now, if there's one thing that I want you guys to leave with tonight, it's knowing that in the process, as a junior golfer or as a junior golf parent, you have a lot of power, okay? You have a lot of power. And, free will, and as we progress through the recruiting process, there's a lot of different decisions that have to be made. There's a lot of different obstacles and considerations that have to be made. And that's pretty obvious to most people. But what's not obvious is that you can pick up the phone at any time and call a college coach. No violation. Can a college coach answer? Absolutely, at any time. Doesn't matter if you're 8 years old out there. And I think there was one 8-year-old that did RSVP for this webinar tonight. So I don't know your name or who you are, but hope you're listening because that was designed for you. You can call a college coach at any time. You can show up on their doorstep, whether that's at the facility, on campus, in their office at any time. That doesn't mean they can entertain any recruiting activities that are based on you or your recruiting process, but you can show up. So don't worry about, if you're doing anything wrong. Now, I'm not saying go out and call college coaches 10 times a day, every single day, in hopes that they're going to they're going to answer. They might not. Sometimes it is difficult to get in touch with college coaches. But for the most part, I would say the most misunderstood, the biggest misconception in the recruiting world is that you as junior golfers, as you as junior golf families, can't reach out, can't take initiative and do that on your own. You can, okay? So let me get back to what we were supposed to be talking about tonight. Unofficial visits versus official visits. So as I said earlier, unofficial, paid by you. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. Official visits, paid by the school, paid by the coach, okay? So official visits, typically in the past, the rule was you can only take official visits senior year. The new rule is that you can start taking those official visits junior year. So as the restrictions have kind of tightened up on unofficial visits, taking at your own pace, at your own expense, those have actually lessened for official visits. So schools like Stanford, schools like Texas, schools like Virginia, big name schools like that, they will probably, and this is a hope, this isn't any part of the rules, this is a consideration, a thought that many coaches and I have discussed, but a lot of those schools are probably going to spend quite a pretty penny on budgeting for those official visits now that that's allowed in junior year, okay? Those will happen earlier than before. They weren't allowed to happen until September 1st of senior year before. Now we're backing it up an entire year. And a lot of those will be big box schools paying for recruits to come on and see a football game, go to a basketball game, and have an extremely lavish, luxurious experience at their expense because they want to recruit a player like you. Now, that being said, percentage-wise, how many official visits versus unofficial visits should I expect to take? Let's say if I'm a freshman later on in the process, as I become a junior or a senior in high school. I would say overwhelmingly in the past, I was talking with a past client of mine today. He told me, he said, Mike, I took probably 7 unofficial visits before I even thought about taking or had the ability to take an official visit. And those visits were freshman year, sophomore year. Now the NCAA and the new rule changes have pretty much eliminated the considerations and the ability to go and take those unofficial visits and get in front of college coaches. As much of a bummer as that is for many of you, I'm gonna talk to you tonight about hopefully some ways to combat that and overcome those restrictions that we so much have been put under at the moment. And by we, I mean junior golfers and junior golf families, not so much myself as a recruiting consultant. Okay? So let's talk about that. Hopefully everyone has a good understanding of what an unofficial and official visit is. If you don't, let's make it super simple. Unofficial, paid by you. Official, paid by them. Okay? Hope that all makes sense. So let's talk about why did the NCAA want to do this? I think that's a big question mark that came through my head, and it was a bit of a shock, to be honest, at first. You know, early April this year, just a few months ago, we heard about these changes, and a lot of coaches were bringing them up and getting my perspective, and I was doing the same from them. And I actually have a survey, not to get sidetracked here, but I have a survey that I put out just a few days ago on Tuesday evening, and 50 Division I coaches responded with their input and their basically their attitude about these rule changes. So if I don't share that with you tonight, make sure that I send you those results if you want them. Okay. Let's talk about it. Why did the NCAA make these changes? Well, according to the NCAA, they wanted to level the playing field, meaning Power 5 schools to mid-majors, and by mid-majors I mean schools that are in the lower conferences, meaning schools like my alma mater, James Madison, we are a mid-major. Schools like Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee, one that I'm very familiar with and good friends with the coach up there. Those are schools that have a big disadvantage to the schools like Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Cal, Washington, Oregon, right? Big name schools that have budgets, that have that bumper sticker appeal. They wanted to level the playing field. So to be honest, it's really to be determined on how much this is going to change the recruiting space. another idea of why the NCAA made these changes, just to kind of get to this real quick, guys. There were a bunch of ideas buzzing around for a long time. I know that. There were so many early commitments. Brad Dahlke, for example. I don't know if Brad, probably not listening tonight, plays for Oklahoma. I think Brad committed when he was 9 years old. Now, he had a family legacy at Oklahoma. He had many, many ties to the school. I think he even lived in the area. And that is a bit of an outlier. But there was many junior golfers that I know and that I was close with, and many that I even consulted with that were committing in 7th, 8th, 9th grade. And the NCAA took notice. And coaches, whether they liked it or not, they were forced to go out and recruit those kids as early as 7th, 8th grade. So these early commitments were really changing the game. And to be honest, I've spoken with many coaches on the men's side, and they've told me I didn't enjoy recruiting kids at 13, 14, 15 years old, but they had to do it to keep pace. If not, their competitors, let's say Oregon, right? Cal, Washington, anyone else in their conference, anyone else that they typically see, let's say in the top 25 of the college ranking, those are their competitors. And if they didn't go out and recruit those kids early, the other teams would have. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So there were a lot of ideas buzzing around for change. There was a lot of confusion on the family side too, that players were making uneducated decisions. They weren't able to talk to coaches really in person that much. College coaches still can't call players until September 1st and initiate conversations until September 1st of their junior year, whether that's on the golf course or off. Whether that's email communications or phone communications. That's pretty much our brick wall. Now, that doesn't mean they can't talk to third parties like myself, a swing coach, maybe a head pro at your golf course, a high school coach, whoever that might be. But for the most part, college coaches could not and did not initiate contact until September 1st of a player's junior year. And that's still the same today. So with that, the NCAA really wanted to implement these changes to level the playing field, okay? And what I mean by that is make it just as easy for a mid-major, like my alma mater, James Madison, to recruit a player that might be looking at let's say a Virginia, okay? So the NCAA really is trying to level that playing field. A player that might have the top 5 schools in Division II recruiting him probably also has some bites in Division I. So let's just kind of conceptualize that for a second. So those Division I schools were ahead of the game. We're able to kind of get a leg up on those Division II schools in many ways. Now the NCAA is really trying to level that playing field by not allowing those unofficial visits and official visits to happen until September 1st of a junior golfer's junior year. Okay. So the intention, let's kind of understand why they did this. And this is their words, not mine, but the idea for the NCAA was for junior golfers to have a more normal recruiting procedure or recruiting experience, more normal, which means, let's say another high school student is not a student athlete. They're applying for schools November, December of their senior year, in hopes to level that playing field, to make it more normal. The NCAA has enacted these rule changes. So, guys, like I said, we still don't know how this is going to affect the recruiting process for many. We still don't know if this is going to change many coaches' mentalities, but we can at least consider that and talk about that tonight, okay? So let's talk about that, how that might affect you as a player. Now, guys, I'm not going to break down freshman, junior, or freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I just don't have the ability and the time to do that tonight. But let's agree on this. And I used an example already earlier. If you are a sophomore finishing your sophomore year, or you may have already finished school, and you're transitioning into your junior year of high school, and you had visits planned to meet with coaches, to see them face-to-face on campus this summer, you are no longer allowed to do that, unfortunately. So obviously that's going to change the game. Let's state the obvious here. For the players, there's going to be later commitments. Why? I think players are going to take fewer visits before junior year. Why? Because they are simply not allowed to meet with coaches. I think families aren't going to be as willing to travel 4, 5, 6, up to, I don't know, maybe even across the country to meet at schools if coaches can't sit there and meet with them. That's pretty obvious, right? I also have a consideration to make here. I think elite players will be able to take a little bit more time to make their decisions, but they also might be less informed throughout this process. Why? Because I think in the past, many of these elite players, and I mean players that are committing first, and we all see this on social media these days. Players love to say, I am happy to announce that I have verbally committed to so-and-so university, right? We see it all. And these kids committing earlier and earlier, that was a big thing. And I think social media had a piece to and a part to play in that piece of the puzzle. Okay, we can talk about that if you guys have any questions there as well. But my thinking is elite players will be able to take a little bit more time to make those decisions because they will be talking to coaches. They will be seeing coaches at AJJs. They'll be able to talk to coaches briefly, but at least have those conversations at these events. And coaches will get in front of them somehow, some way. That is to be determined. And I have some other ideas on that point here in a second. But elite players, from my perspective, elite players will take more time to make those decisions, but they will also be less informed because they are going to be making those decisions junior year and senior year only. They won't be committing, I don't think, as early as 7th, 8th, 9th grade. And that's kind of the whole point of these NCAA rules, right? All right, what else? Average players and elite players, so let's kind of group those into two, right? They will begin to commit at somewhat similar times. And what I mean by that is in the past, we saw a lot of these elite players committing early in the process and to schools in these Power 5 conferences, right? The ACC, the SEC, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, right? We saw a lot of these players committing so early. Now, I think now that we've kind of closed that window of opportunity with these rule changes, these players will start to commit at the same time. And what that means, guys, and this is something to understand, what that means is if you're a player out there that maybe isn't that blue chip recruit or that elite athlete, right, you're going to be competing and you're going to have more chance at taking an elite player spot. Why? Because you're going to be committing around the same time, and these players won't be committing as early or early as they have in the past. Let's agree on that. I think we can at least generalize that. Is that going to be true for every school? Absolutely. Is that going to be true for every player in every state? No, not at all. We have to take some considerations into effect. What else is going to change for you as players? I think the unofficial visits will change. Many coaches and I have brainstormed about this, and what I'm thinking is a lot of these teams, a lot of these coaches will probably create a loophole. I hate to say it that way, but it's going to be a loophole of the unofficial visit. It's going to be something where the visits don't involve the college coaches. They might include a athlete from the soccer team, let's say, that just so happens to have the keys to the golf facilities, right? And can tour you on a visit to the golf facility. That is not a violation. So there might be restraints, there might be restrictions, there might be some pushback from the NCAA once they figure this out, but that is still to be determined. What else is going to change? I think these visits, these unofficial visits, are going to shift and pivot from a regular unofficial visit to campus to more so of a admissions tour. But we all know the average or the regular college student. What do they do when they want to go and visit a school? They talk to the admissions department. They get on a admissions visit and they tour the campus. Okay, I think there will be a lot more student athletes doing that now. I don't think there's any downfall to that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I want you guys to be prepared. That if that is the only option, take that option, take that road and pursue it. That's still a great way to learn more about the school and potentially build that relationship with a college coach, even though he or she might not be there. This change is going to benefit international players. Why? Well, in the past, many international players, not all, but very, very good portion, a very good chunk of them have waited very late in the process to even come to America, to even contact coaches. So now what this is doing, it's really leveling that playing field for them as well, because these American players, these domestic players will not be committing as early. That is also going to keep those roster spots, keep those opportunities, or those chairs, almost like we're playing a game of duck, duck, goose, right? There's only so many chairs in the room left for those international players. There will be more chairs left come junior, senior year for those international players, okay? I'm not going to touch on that too much because I don't think we have too many internationals out there tonight, but even if you're an American player, that's a consideration to be had. You're not just competing with those players that you see on Junior Golf School Board. You're not just competing with those players that you're playing with in high school tournaments in your local area. You're competing with players from all over the globe. Quick stat for those of you that don't know, 20% and growing, I think it's closer to 21% right now, of college golfers are from outside the United States. Digest that for a second. So if the average men's golf team has 10 players, which is pretty much, I would say, pretty accurate, maybe 9.8, I would say, to be precise. Let's just call it 10 players. 2 of those spots on any average golf team are taken up by international players, okay? That's a big consideration to make. So although you might not think, oh, this rule changed, he's talking about international players, that doesn't affect me. It does, because you'll be competing with them when the time comes for those roster spots, for those college scholarships, all right? All right, transitioning here. Let's talk about how this might affect the college coaches themselves. And I'm going to share my screen and share the survey that I sent those coaches on Tuesday in just a minute and share with you those results. I think you might find them intriguing. So just bear with me here. What is going to happen from a coach's perspective? There's going to be fewer unofficial visits, but more official visits. Guys, not rocket science. We talked about these rule changes earlier in this webinar tonight. Unofficial visits are not allowed at all until September 1st of a player's junior year now. Before it was at any time. Official visits have now backed up from senior year to junior and senior year, okay? So pretty cut and dry. There's going to be fewer unofficials and more officials. So from a coach's standpoint, there's going to be significantly less interactions with players on campus, on their stomping grounds before junior year. I don't care if a coach is infatuated by you. They cannot get you or initiate contact to get you onto campus. They just can't do it. All right? So there's going to be fewer players on campus. That's going to be tough, right? Let's just agree on that. Now, progressing to that point, there's going to be an increased number of official visits, which means more money put aside fiscally or financially by those big name bumper sticker schools. Now, mid-majors like my alma mater, James Madison. I know you guys don't know or maybe love James Madison, but we are a smaller school. We have a good budget, but nowhere near the budgets of Alabama, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Cal, some of these programs that are just Georgia, some of these programs that are just feeding players to the PGA Tour, right? And have big time football teams, basketball teams where they can create these athletic budgets and these boosters where they have a ton of backing to create this atmosphere, this environment where a coach can bring in 5 players and treat them to a dinner, treat them to a basketball game, treat them to a hotel stay. And maybe even make that over the course of 48 hours, okay? Just understand that there's going to be an increased number of those official visits, and that's going to mean for coaches, we're thinking on the coach side here, guys, for coaches, that's going to mean more money put aside for those entertainment activities and those official visits, all right? What else is this going to mean for coaches and for these programs? They're going to have to be okay with later commitments and quicker commitments. And what I mean by that, if I'm a coach and I put out let's say a scholarship offer to a player or a family, when that happens is probably, let's agree that those are going to happen later because players are not going to get in front of coaches as early. And for the most part, those are going to happen later. Now, guys, you can still commit early. There's no restrictions to that. You can still call coaches at any time, and they can talk about a scholarship offer. They can talk about anything. Okay, so there's no restrictions there. Let's clear the air there. But for the most part, those commitments are going to be, I think, auctioned out later in the process. And what that's really going to do is put a lot more pressure on these programs that really want you or really want to get a player like you. Okay, and that pressure, what that pressure is going to do is create a much more hectic situation, and that hectic situation is going to lead to much quicker decisions, or maybe even, hate to say it, but maybe even ultimatums by college coaches. So that might sound like, hey, Johnny, I wanted to call you today and be intentional with our conversation. You've shown me great play on the golf course. We've had great conversations so far. I know you love so-and-so university. I want to go ahead and offer you a scholarship. Now, would it be okay if you let me know within 7 days if you want to come to so-and-so university or not? Those restraints, those considerations are going to be much more pressure-packed now that these rule changes happen, okay? So just understand that as well. Coaches are going to build relationships in many different ways. Coaches are going to rely on phone calls. They're going to rely on recruits calling you. They're going to rely on third-party communication. People like myself that work in the college consulting industry, swing coaches, high school coaches, third party, anyone that could be, okay? They're going to rely on them us reaching out to them as coaches. What else are they going to do? They're going to do probably more off-campus recruiting. Right now, college coaches are going to rely on that off-campus recruiting. Those evaluations at AJGAs, Future Champions events, Hurricane Tour events, FCWTs, whatever your tour you're playing on. Coaches are going to leverage and rely on those opportunities much more than they have in the past because of these rule changes that we have been speaking about today, okay? And then I also mentioned this earlier, but campus tours. It's kind of up in the air. It's kind of a big question mark still, but college coaches are going to leverage and change the way that these campus tours happen. I guarantee you that. There's already been a lot of concern, a lot of hoopla, a lot of talk around recruiting rules or boundaries being pushed. And I mean from August 25th, from the rules changes, from now. I mean, that was only about a month, about 6 weeks ago. That wasn't that long ago. And there's already been talks about those rules being changed. And to that point, a lot of those coaches that are really pushing the envelope were at regionals and nationals and playing the national championship that many of you may have watched on the Golf Channel. So, I mean, they're brainstorming these things. They're really digging deep to get these blue chip recruits.